little bit of talking up front, but this is going to be a lot of you in breakouts and us getting into the workshopping very shortly. So if there are some people you're not, aware of or know well in this, you'll get chances to meet with them and introduce yourselves, please, when you do talk in the main group later. But I'm just going to quickly bring us back up to speed. So this is the third of sessions that we've been doing as an interest group. It won't be the last, like there will need to be further work going forward, but I will get into what that might look like. But this is the journey that we've been on. So we did some original work on if this is a field building interest group, what is our goal for a built field of deliberative processes? We then talked about what are the system outcomes that are required in order to achieve that vision. And we had a bit of a conversation about, well, which of those should we be focusing on most? And we factored into that both where we think things aren't happening that well, but also what maybe our unique strengths are as actors in the system compared to maybe what others are well placed to do. And then based on that, we kind of starred a few areas in that system that we thought we might focus on. We then tested that in Brussels. So thank you all for the work that went into that so that we were able to present something at the conference. I know most of you were there, and I've worked my way through 70 something, responses written on those pieces of paper at that session in response to that feedback, in response to that map that we shared. And you'll probably be pleased to know too that about 40 something or 50 people put their email addresses down asking to be kept up to date with the interest group. So I think we've got a reasonable level of network interest in what you're doing here. So what today is about is sharing what the proposed changes that I sent through a few days ago in response to that feedback so that we're reflecting what the network's saying, but also then using that to reassess our focus areas. Where should we be focusing on? Because I think the network has some views on that more broadly that we might want to factor in. And then what are kind of the main deliverables that we think we should be trying to focus on supporting, at least in the short term? Like what's the first cabs off the rank? And then some of these ones here where we get into then what foundations do we need in place in order to take those actions? Who exactly is going to do what, when, etc. Like putting action plans together for those, I think is something that will happen in the next step. But the hope is that today, and I'll get into the agenda slide, that we can kickstart those streams. So here's the proposal for the three pieces. And then I'll just check the chat that has a bit going on. But I will check your comfort with the updated theory of change. Then, as I said, finalize our focus areas. So I'm going to recommend that we do a quick vote on which 3 or 4 of those system outcomes we think we should prioritize our work on to begin with. So essentially revisiting where we put the stars last time. And then with your permission, if you're comfortable with it, recommending that we kickstart some potential working groups. So we go, okay, which of those might you be best suited to help out with? And then deciding what initial deliverable should each of those focus on to try and support some change in that part of the system. And what's just the first step you're going to take to try and achieve that? And I think what we're probably proposing is that we would then split this conversation off. So rather than necessarily meeting like this every time, we might have then those separate interest groups coming together to start that action together. And I'm happy to continue supporting those conversations going forward. Before I get into the first part of this, so sharing the theory of change, can I just check, does anyone have an issue with this agenda, particularly this last one, the idea that we're just starting to see what working groups might start to form around some of these actions? I just want to check people don't have issues with where we're heading. I'll give you a moment.
I do have an observation. Oh,
Yeah, thanks. Is that you, Benjamin?
Yeah, but Jacob raised his hand, so I'll
Go
let him.
ahead, Benjamin. That's fine. That's fine.
uh, there were a couple of groups in Brussels that were talking about theories of change, and I know one of them reached out, and I have to find out. I lost the track of it, but about pursuing like how to engage participants in promoting the process. So I just wondered about. I never had a chance while I was there or since really, unfortunately, to like see about connecting those dots. Did you notice that? Is that something? I don't
Yes,
know.
there's probably a few things to flag there, if you don't mind quickly, Jacob. I think the first is that, I mean, Sanskriti, who's here, maybe she can give a wave. Sanskriti and team were looking at field building, particularly in the global south, which I think we need to keep checking this against. And I think I'm happy to um, do an additional treatment if you feel, particularly since Greedy, that that conversation that you're involved with isn't reflected in this. So I think first of all, that's almost like a similar conversation we need to make sure is aligned. But I think the other context in which theory of change was brought up, at least that I witnessed at Brussels, was almost like the network's theory of change, like the big picture item. And I think it is worth really clarifying that that is not the purpose of this. So this is you are a specific interest group looking at how do we grow the field. And we've prepared a theory of change that helps you direct your work on that. It's not trying to suggest that this is the entirety of the network's work or a theory of change, for example, of deliberative processes and how they impact the system. It's actually quite a humble thing that is just for this interest group to guide its work. Um, Let me know if anyone disagrees with that, but I just think that's probably an important distinction. But yeah, but I would say if people are aware of other ones that this should be speaking to or relating to, I'm happy to look at that afterwards and check that they're matched up. Does that help, Benjamin?
Yeah, that helps. Thanks.
So yeah, feel free as an action item. Feel free to send me things that you think this should be connecting to or marrying up with, but it doesn't have to be everything. Jakob.
Yeah, maybe I'll link to that first because I have been part of organizing a deep dive in Brussels together with Eva Rovers from Bürgerberaat in Netherlands and so Central from Norway. And Benjamin has been on the table. I've been facilitating in that deep dive where we
That's the one
discussed,
I
or
lost track of the email, Jacob.
yeah,
So
exactly, because there's also that we try to follow up and build groups now.
I would
And
like to
that
do
deep
that. So if you could bump it up.
and the deep dive was about how do we actually, that was more a bit like how do we better campaign for the work we do, and how do we reach more people to understand what citizens assemblies and deliberative formats are about, and that they can be part of the solution to sustaining our democracies. And I think that's very much linked to actually our field building activity. So and there we also now, I think next week there's a first session where we try to convene all those people from the deep dive who are willing and have time to contribute further. I'm not sure where that will go, but it might make sense to also kind of see if we should not link those two activities, especially if we also go into working groups here in this group. What I initially wanted to, and so maybe I'll connect you, Scott, with Eva Rovers, who's kind of leading on that, organizing the other group, and you could discuss whether it might make sense to bring it even together. What I
It,
initially
it,
wanted to say is that I like the agenda, and kind of personally, I guess I won't be able to join a working group due to too many other things. But and that's maybe I'm too early in the discussion, but I had the feeling that there's a lot of items on the list we already have, which are good that we as an international network could work on, but there's a lot of other items where I had the feeling that's actually things that kind of we all do on the ground in our countries, in our regions, where I wouldn't necessarily need to have the kind of the international sphere, So maybe we could think of where does it really make sense for which items to build working groups where we can really bring um, yeah, kind of something which everyone can use on the ground, and what are things which definitely happen on the ground.
yeah, absolutely. And as I start moving to Sylvia, I think so. There's two things there. One is yes, absolutely. Let's flush out what existing work is already being done that might actually just be the action that we're looking for that matches our theory of change. And I think, I don't know if it was the same deep dive I was in Jakob, but I know that there's a thing emerging that we've been in touch with David and the team about around engaging influencers and giving them what they need to play more of a role. And so that could be an example of an action that falls under this theory of change. So I think let's start connecting those dots today. But also on that second part, yes, I think in some cases there might be a coordination exercise. So it's less that we need a working group that's coming together to drive a unique action. It's more that we need to all just be checking that maybe we're sharing resources or taking learning from each other's approaches. And Jamie's agreeing with that on the stuff that we're doing anyway as kind of our BAU. Sylvia?
Yes, exactly as I was listening to Benjamin, Jacob, and you, I would propose for the point 3, the agenda point 3, that the deliverable we focus today on who is going to be in which working group, and the first deliverable, I think it's already phrased here, that is to map the initiatives and resources and the things that are already being done on that and try to coordinate. I mean, I think this is the first task for our
Yeah, great.
so we don't start from zero for something that has already a lot of people working on.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea. So let's take that first approach of what action is already being taken on that system outcome that you've chosen, and then we build from there. And then I think it will become clearer what needs to be done for that particular one, and it could differ per outcome. Thank you all. So with your permission, I'm going to, as quickly as I can, try and just share what are the main changes to the map and just check that we're comfortable with that, and then we'll get into the other bits. So this is what I've sent around to you beforehand. The highlights are obviously the bits that have changed. And in the subsequent slides, which you've got access to, we talk about why these changes. So if I just quickly look at the system goal, the first bit that we got some feedback on is we had a word there that was around politically gridlocked. There was just the suggestion to broaden that out a bit because it may not be politically gridlocked specifically, but it's a tough, contentious issue. So, for example, it could sit in the private or non-profit or community space or whatever, but it's still trying to maintain the intent of that term. The other bit here, and this is probably a significant one, is that people were rubbing up against the specification of lottery selected deliberation. This was for a few reasons. So the main point was that we want to enable the selection of the right deliberative process for a given context. There were some considerations that there may be the political or regional context that we're dealing with might lend itself to lottery selected being possible or not. Also, I think it was trying to build on the versatility, same as that earlier point, that we're talking about lots of different places where this could be used. And so we just, having the term deliberative processes just allows some flexibility there. The last one was just a simple one in that the phrase go-to method, that the idea that deliberative processes are a go-to decision-making method was just kind of slightly weird language. So we've just put preferred there instead. I'm just going to keep going down now quickly, and then I'll check if people have questions. But the next part, when we get into the outcomes, people just wanted to emphasize that things are positively known. So because the process is better known and appreciated, right? So just putting that extra flavor on, we're trying to create a positive association through that awareness with the process. This second one, because conveners and stakeholders are less likely to reject the process. So this is pointing out that often the people that need persuading either directly or to assure the convener that they should be taking these processes on is all the different interest groups and stakeholders that are going to be influenced or going to be affected by the decision. It's about them also embracing the process. So sometimes we have to think about what might make them comfortable in order to, participate in the process and see it as the main process used to make a decision. So that's why they've been added to these two ones here. There was also this point under 2A that some conveners may be concerned about threat to their power of ceding power over to a deliberative group, but that might actually be a perceived and not a real threat. So there were some arguments that using these processes can actually, in some cases, help kind of preserve a convener's power because it gives them a legitimacy among their constituents or whatever going forward. So I think that was just a point that quite a few people made. Under 3A, this is starting to link to this purple one because we're just kind of updating wording in a few areas. So this was about specifying that the process can better meet convener and stakeholder needs as well as the broader issue. This is recognizing that as part of selling these processes to conveners is helping them realize that they don't just help unlock ways forward on tough, contentious issues, although that is the most important thing that they do, but they can also just make the conveners' lives easier. If they're dealing with, political gridlock, they're dealing with lose-lose decisions that they're having to make, just pointing out that it can potentially save them time, money, political, challenges in the long run. So that was just the idea of pointing out that it can effectively address the issue and their needs better than the approach they're probably taking. And then 3B is just really emphasizing with the more generally, the point of this one, 3B, is this is less about selling deliberative processes specifically, and it's more about selling the idea of greater public participation generally, that we're trying to get their buy-in to going beyond just voting and seeing the value of their public being more involved in many ways. And then the final one, number 4 over here, because this column was more about it's kind of about our making sure the processes are run effectively. I will say that I think that there's a limit to this for the field building group. Like, you're not suddenly responsible for the quality assurance of the entire process. I think other parts of the network can work on that and take that on more fully. But what this is about is recognizing that just because the process is known and people are embracing it and not rejecting it, doesn't mean that it's necessarily being run well to achieve that goal. So some of the fine-tuning that people suggested around that is that we need to emphasize the process is not just credible and effective, but it's legitimate. And also that all of those things are happening to the point that the process is meaningfully impacting the issue that it's setting out to address. And then on 4C here was just trying to build out the convener's commitment. So I think the language we had there previously was something like the convener's committed to addressing the group's recommendations or something. And people just really suggested we need to ramp that up more. So because conveners are committed to the process and to successfully implementing recommendations with other actors. So they're committed to supporting the process, to implementing the recommendations, but then there's also this acknowledgement that a lot of that is done through collaboration and partnership with other actors. It's not just limited to the things they as a convener can do. So there's a lot there. Sorry to talk at you. I'm going to very quickly touch on these things down here, and then I'm just going to flag some of the feedback I'm proposing we don't action, which is important that we agree on that as well. So just flagging here, some people had, one of the questions we asked people at Brussels was, what do you think we should be doing about this? And these highlights are somewhat additional to what we had already been thinking about. So the first is exactly what Sylvia's suggested, mapping existing field building efforts to avoid duplication and learning what works. There's also a suggestion that we're strategically identifying specific windows of opportunity for campaigning in different countries. So this kind of goes to Jakob's point that a lot of us may already be doing this as part of the BAU somehow. Maybe the unique value we could add in that is diagnosing some real targeted opportunities where the conditions are right for us to go hard at a particular time in a part of the world. There was really emphasis from a lot of people about partnering with storytellers and artists to turn our case studies into really persuasive, engaging cultural narratives. And also, yeah, which we've got people like Jamie here for as well. And then engaging a diverse range of traditional media and influencers to distribute those stories. And I think you can already hear we're starting to hint there that there is some skills that exist in the network for that already, but do we need to go broader to pull those skills in? And then in terms of these middle ones, how we're helping conveners, stopping them from rejecting and helping them embrace the process. Some of the suggestions people had was around better engaging past conveners who've experienced these processes to grow our understanding of what conveners' needs, what their concerns and reservations are, what they find most persuasive, but also actively collaborating with those conveners on field building actions. So there was this idea, and I think there was quite a lot of conversation in Brussels about this, is should there be more government officials here? Should there be more conveners across different domains that are actively part of the network and here with us? So I think that's something to consider, how we might collaborate with them even just as a field building group. Then next, they talked about sharing standards and data to demonstrate that our processes have a greater impact than status quo methods. So just making sure we've got the data and evidence to show. And then finally, the value of partnering with expert community and movement organisers in our work around mobilising communities and movements. So I think a bunch of us have skills and experience in that space, but recognising that there are maybe some across the network who don't necessarily work with deliberative processes per se, but they're really, really good at getting community to working with community to apply pressure on government and others to take action, which is part of what sits under this. All right. Last thing I will share is feedback I did not incorporate, and just check that you don't think that's a horrible idea. So there were some more recommendations around quality assurance. So people starting to go, oh, we need to set standards for good deliberative processes. How are we going to monitor those and measure against those, etc.? My view, but interested if people feel differently, is that it may slightly be the English phrase is the tail wagging the dog. If we end up with this field building group spending a lot of time trying to work on the quality assurance, I think it's an important part we should acknowledge, but there may be others in the network or even among us working on that outside of growing the field. Sylvia's thumbs up there, but we'll check. Next is changing the word convener to decision maker or client. My logic there is just that the vast majority of people seemed comfortable enough with that language that to change it now people might have issues with it. So I think we all know what we're talking about. Let's maybe not change it if it's not a big issue for many. Merging outcomes 2 and 3. So a lot of people going, and I'll just flick back, but isn't stopping conveners from rejecting the process and helping them embrace the process, aren't they just the same? Can't we just put them over the top? Which I think is a reasonable argument. My concern with that is that we could end up, if we merge them, only ever focusing on selling the benefits, for example, and failing to help reduce some of the barriers and concerns that are affecting conveners taking this on. So perhaps we need to make sure we're doing both. And then finally, incorporating benefits of the goal into the map. So people were saying, oh, well, somewhere in the map, we need the fact that if this is all happening, it will improve policies, it will restore trust, it will help change people's mindsets, etc. I think that's all really valid points, and that's why we're doing all of this. But I'd argue that they almost sit above the theory of change. So if you kept this flowing up, they flow out from the goal at the top. they're the benefits that we get, but we don't necessarily need to include them all in it. All right, I'm done. I'm not going to talk much more today. Tom, at this stage, I'm just going to check, do you have any questions? Because then I will do a little exercise to just check if people disagree with any of what has landed there. But Tom, any questions?
Thanks. Yeah, I just had a question about it's kind of a technical point really about why you were suggesting farming out the quality assurance to somewhere else. Is that because you've analysed who's in this group and their capacity, and there's some other standard setting going on somewhere else, or why specifically that? Don't not that I mind. I'm just kind of curious about.
No, I get you. No. It's not. It's nothing to do with capability. It's more that if we're convening here to build the field, how comfortable are we with our time being spent quality assuring the field? Is that not a different thing that is linked, but not the core purpose of this? But if people feel differently, I think we can turn it into one of the streams. But I just wasn't sure whether by going down that path we get to help grow it. Yeah. What I might do is I will take that as we move into the next bit. If you disagree with that, let us know in the next activity. Does anyone have just any clarifying questions at this point? Okay. What I might do, I can see there's some comments in the chat that I will check when we come back, but I think it might be good to just pop people in pairs for a moment. And I'm going to, if you just give me 1 second, I'm going to introduce I'll bring us over to a group map, which is a tool that we've used previously. And I just want to check that people are comfortable with where we've landed. Apologies. It's taking a moment to come up. But some of you might remember our L scale that we've used previously. I'll share my screen and show it to you now. So I'm just going to put a link to this in the chat. So if you don't mind clicking the link that's just appeared in the Zoom chat. And I'm just going to, if you don't mind, pop you into pairs in a moment and ask, how comfortable are you with where we've landed with that map? If you need to view it, it's over here. You can click on that and click on this PDF and it will bring the map back up. If you need to look at it again, it'll bring it up there with the slides I just shared. But the question is, could you add your names in whichever of these columns best describes how comfortable you are with where we've landed? And is there one thing that would most improve your comfort that we should keep in mind? Yeah, so for example, I might say, Scott, I can live with it. And then, but what would most improve it is if, the quality assurance piece, stays and is expanded, for example, and then hit enter. Does that make sense? Yeah, I'm seeing nods.
Yes.
Rebecca, what were you going to say before we get into that briefly?
It's a question about the kind of the scope of feedback. So there's one particular term that I'm having trouble with. Is it okay if I do respond on the basis of that one term, even though I kind of like the overall shape of the theory of change?
Yeah. So you're saying you've got some feedback on one of the terms?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Do you mind
That's all
putting
right.
that in this?
In the map?
Sorry, go, Rebecca.
In the
in this column thing that we've just shared. So let me know, how do you feel with it? How comfortable are you? But then what's your suggestion around the term? And then we'll come back and we'll just have a full conversation about any feedback people have. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm very interested in it, but just want to do it all together is all. All right, are people okay if I send us out into breakouts for 10 minutes to have a chat about that? Niels is nodding. He looks ready. He's ready to roll. All right. Sending you out now, 10 minutes, fill this column out, and we'll come back and have a chat. And then we'll move to the next bit. Thanks, everyone.
I will watch the chat this time.
Oh, okay. Yeah, nice. Are you going to go into your breakout, David? Because I think, oh, maybe I haven't assigned you to one.
I don't think you've assigned me to one.
No, I haven't. That's all right. Stephanie, how are you? She's coming in and out. I'll just tell her that, Stephanie,
Yeah, she's on the
I'll
train.
put you in with another pair. So all good if you can't talk. I'll pop her in with Debbie and Sylvia. Is there one in particular you want to maybe jump in with, David?
No, anyone would be fine.
Okay, great. I'll pop you in with a random group. Yes, I'd appreciate you. Actually, I think you have to assign yourself
Oh,
because I can't. Are you able to, does it have an option down the bottom for you to select the breakout room?
hold on. I'm looking. Zoom changed their menus a while back. The breakout thing used to be right in front and center and easy to find. I don't know where it went. I don't see it.
Does it have do you have the more button with the three
Yeah,
dots?
I was just looking there. Oh, here it is, breakout rooms. Okay,
Yeah.
breakout
What happens
rooms.
when you click that? Does it let you pick which one?
It looks, yeah, it looks like it lets me pick. So is there, I guess, anyone is fine. I'm going to join the one with Anna and Sanskriti.
Nice.
Oh.
All right, thank you. And yeah, keep an eye on your chat in case. Thanks, David. Hi, Stefan. Can you hear me? Hello, Stefan.
Hello, yes, I can hear you.
Hey, there we go. How are you?
I'm good, but I can just listen in for now if this is fine.
Yeah, sure. Everyone's about to come back from their breakouts in a minute.
Perfect, thank you. I'll listen in and then join it actively a bit later.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Stefan. Good to have you here. Hey, Lisa.
Hi, Scott. Okay, so one thing is that I was not fortunate to attend the meeting, a workshop, and deep dive. I don't know, I missed it somehow. Maybe I was engaged with
That's
something else. Yes, yeah, I definitely missed it. So, but
Yeah, that's all right. I think you probably got. Are you referring to the session we did on this in Brussels?
yep,
Yeah. So I think I'm very happy to send you. I mean, if you want to see the full breakdown of all the feedback that we got, but you've probably essentially been caught up because you've now seen the main feedback we got and what we've done with it. So I wouldn't worry too much that you've missed out on a lot there now.
I would have added some points because the goal itself is noble, is really good, but it's absolutely unachievable in my country. And I have some other steps to take to make that goal achievable, so to speak. So
Yeah, sure.
if I were there, I would have suggested certain other steps to take. Um, in 1A or in 2 or yeah, okay, but
Yeah,
I'm
well, do you want to kick us off then there, Lisa? So, welcome everyone. Lisa just came back like you did and just we started talking.
yeah,
So let's just do a quick sense check. I'll show where we landed on the map in a second. In fact, I'll bring everyone over so people can see where we landed. But do you want to just kick us off, Lisa, with what I think already we can see some flexing of the map to try and allow for a bit more flexibility in different regions. I think some of that was part of what the feedback was suggesting from Brussels. But yeah, what do you think you would add, particularly for your context, that's missing?
yeah, in my own context, I would have added in section 1, I would have added some yeah, you have a media, you have a storyteller telling, and I would have added a survey, online survey or any kind of survey for the people or the public opinion. Would they think about civic engagement or extra maybe focus group meetings in small towns or all regions, or it's just different methodologies that might help. Yeah, I think more of it could, yeah, there could be some
Excellent.
of those, yeah.
No, I think that's excellent. I think you're already then riffing on some of the other methods that could be used underneath this to support that. So I think absolutely we can hold space for that as part of where this is heading. Thank you. I think that's great. Jamie, were you going to add something on that?
Yeah, I think I'm really glad that Lisa brought that up. It's just something that's helpful in that area that Lisa's talking about, which is in the Global Assembly that we did in 2021, we did something based on what Claire Mellier had learnt from the French Assembly, which is when she spoke to the Assembly members afterwards, they said, we would have gone much further if we knew that France learnt what we just learnt. So in the Global Assembly, we did an experiment where we put out a sort of a brief really around the world. I think it was just $50. You can run your own community assembly, and there's a toolkit that you'll get sent, and there's 3 versions. I think it's something like a 2-hour version, an 8-hour version, and a 2-day version. You can download it and go through an approximation of the learning that's happening in the assembly. And it was just an experiment, as the Global Assembly was. But what was interesting is this notion that the more that the public feel engaged in what's going on in there, not only bolsters the people in the assembly itself, but also familiarizes people with the learning processes. I think it's a really neat move, you know.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll reiterate that, Kirsten, I think you put that up in the group map just then, the idea that we could get better at outreach during deliberative processes, and it's got that dual benefit. So I think that's definitely emerging, and that's a good thing that leverages our strengths. That, you know, that's tough for maybe other actors to do that necessarily, because we're often the ones running these processes. So that's a great intervention point. Rebecca, so I might just quickly share this so people can see where we've landed. So I'm just going to start with, okay, great. This great stuff Tom's just put in. I'm going to start with just particularly our laments, because I think the like-its I can take away and look at in more detail afterwards. But let's make sure that we don't have anyone lamenting it. So Rebecca, do you want to talk about your stakeholder framing concern?
Yeah, I don't know why it cut off. I tried to edit it, but you knew what word I was referring to.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and I was worried about doing this because I've missed a few of these and I wasn't involved in the kind of the drafting process. So if this was already discussed and you came to the conclusion that this is the best word for what you're trying to say, I'll live with it. But I did just want to surface that I have a discomfort with the use of stakeholder for a few reasons. So one, I think it's just one of those words that actually ends up obscuring what you're talking about rather than revealing it. So like, who do we actually mean when we say that? Then can we use the precise words? And the other is that it is a word that has its roots in colonialism and the idea of sticking a stake in the ground to claim land that is not yours. So with that, I just wanted to kind of ask if there was an openness to changing that word to an alternative word or words. And maybe there's a conversation about who do we mean when we say that? Are we talking about civil society actors? Are we talking about just people? So it might be a fruitful conversation to think about who actually is the audience.
Yeah, beautiful, excellent intervention. So I think let's talk about that briefly now. At the bottom of the page, you can see that we've defining convener, first of all, it could be a politician, government entity, non-government organization, company, or even a community. So I think, first of all, acknowledging that convener term is deliberately flexible. But then when it comes to, yes, the stakeholder, what's it trying to add in addition to that? My understanding from what I was reading in the feedback, so I'll at least share that as a starting point, was people were recognizing that if a convener was brought on, but other people or organizations involved in a decision-making process didn't support a deliberative process being used for that would make it harder for the convener to use it. So I don't know whether that's something we want to kind of make our problem and look at trying to address that, or whether we just focus on the convener. But what are people's thoughts on that, about how we either frame who that is, whether we include it at all? What do people think?
I would, excuse me.
Benjamin and then Tom?
Yeah, I keep not raising my hand, sorry. Well, Rebecca, thank you for that clarification, and I hadn't thought about it that way. I do. I mean, we use stakeholders all the time, of course, and I've never thought about that issue. But I mentioned briefly to Tom as we were about to leave that session was wondering if we're treating conveners and stakeholders equally, all like are our approaches to the same? Because I think, and I will use the word stakeholder until suggested a better name, so forgive me, but like we do need stakeholder buy-in, because there are those peripheral groups or those groups that aren't the main conveners that also do need to potentially help with the process, help with the results, or convey the message further. So they are separate groups, and I think we need to attack them. I was wondering, which had just occurred to me, do we need the same approach for the two categories, or would somehow, it seems a little late in the game here, but like I was thinking, like, what if it's the conveners who we want less likely to reject, and the stakeholders and the conveners more likely to embrace, like sort of separated those two. But that was just the thought I had during our time.
Yeah, gotcha, Benjamin. And I'm also hearing from that too, that maybe you're implying that they're not necessarily the priority, that it's more appropriate to be working directly with conveners, in which case you're helping them address the challenge of bringing stakeholders on board, getting their buy-in into a process, but we're not necessarily shouting them out maybe in this process. Tom, and then Sylvia.
Chat with Ben, and we were discussing this word, and I think maybe as Rebecca is alluding to, I think there's so many, like, who's not a stakeholder, and the different people and organizations and power interests that exist within that word require very different ways of dealing with them in a theory of change. So I'm not really sure what it means in this. I think it's too broad to put in a theory of change document.
Yeah, okay. So once again, what I'm hearing as I go to Sylvia is that maybe we keep the focus on conveners, but we recognize that we're inevitably probably going to end up thinking about some of those different parties as part of supporting conveners to get buy-in to the process. Sylvia?
Oh, I disagree. I think that we have to keep stakeholders with another definition and another expression. I think one of the points of our work is to integrate and try to integrate and put together on the table groups and interests that normally don't talk and don't collaborate, and they will do it because they are on service. We try to put them on service to the people, to the citizens, to the participants, to the citizen assembly. So I really think the way that we work here in Brazil, stakeholders are, if we don't have their, if they don't embrace or if they reject, we are done. I mean, we don't even start the process. So I think we have to keep them. But I agree with Rebecca, and thank you for alerting us. We can use, I think that it's these contentious and tough problems normally have groups, movements, organizations, private business that are directly working on it, advocating for it, studying it. So I think we can try a description that is a little bit longer, but that describes what we mean, which is people who are struggling on that subject, on that issue, on that agenda in the society in an organized way. And we were working, I take the opportunity to raise another doubt. I know that it's there, but it's just occurred to me that we didn't refer to, they are in the system goal, people from all walks of life, but they are not in any outcomes. They are not, people from all walks of life are not mentioned in any of the outcomes. So I just wonder if, are they a stakeholder too? Or should we, I don't know. I just
Yeah,
doubt.
It's an excellent point, Sylvia. Just on that last point, because it did come up a bit too in some of the feedback. I think there's two things we should flag. One is just because we get into trying to build the field, we shouldn't lose sight of, yes, we might be working a lot with conveners and others, but we ultimately are doing it for the people from all walks of life. But also that was a point that was made by people that, and I haven't added it in here yet because it's almost like a principle of how we approach all this work, is how could we bring people from all walks of life more into our actual process of building the field. And I think that's something we can add across all of this, and it influences how we approach our case studies and all kinds of things. So I think we take that forward as a principle. I've put just the kind of the language you were workshopping there a bit in the chat, like people working on or affected by the issue, like maybe that's what we mean by stakeholders, to Rebecca's point, like who actually is this? Just before I go back to Benjamin, is there anyone else who wants to make a comment on that point? No. Okay. I'll go to Benjamin and then David, but I would invite specific suggestions. Like if we still want to include something like this, what language are we comfortable with? Otherwise, I'm going to pull it out for now, and we can tease it out when we get into the actions that sit under these outcomes. Benjamin?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly clarify. I do think that stakeholders should be mentioned, whatever the term we use. I'm just wondering if our approach to the two categories of groups is I would suggest it's not exactly the same. So
is that in your head the conveners are the priority? Or not? What's that? What do you mean?
I think there's a priority. I think they're both important because we need, especially, but I just, conveners, we need to actually do something. Stakeholders, we need to support something. So that's just something I thought about in the last few minutes. So I need to.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
I do think they're, and I think the definition is a good place to start that you gave. So.
Yeah, so stakeholders need to support, but conveners, need to act in the sense that, in relation to what we're trying to do here, there is a bit of a hierarchy of who we're trying to influence most, I suppose. Yeah, David?
I wanted to speak to Rebecca's very good point about, well, what do we mean? Who are we really talking about when we talk about stakeholders? I have, in this network and other places, heard that term used for two very different categories of people. One is organized groups whose support is needed for a decision to get implemented or whatever. If they're not on board, they will sabotage the process, etc. A very different category is people whose lives are greatly affected by the decision, don't have the power to sabotage the process. In fact, usually never get to the table, never get heard.
And what does that mean for you for this, David, in terms of how we approach it in the theory of change, do you think?
Maybe just being a little more specific, having a footnote definition about stakeholders, because I think the people who are affected but often not represented, that's really important to include in, like what Sylvia was just talking about all walks of life in process designs, etc. And winning support from organized groups is something different.
Yeah, understand, David. Thank you. So I think I'm going to move on to Jakob's point that he's put in there, but I think invitation to anyone at any point to pop in the chat any suggestions for alternative phrasing we might use for stakeholder. But I think if we can't quite land something that everyone seems quite comfortable with, I think the path of least resistance is to pull it out for now, and we keep teasing it out as we go forward rather than including it here. But please post in the chat if you've got thoughts, or if you can see people putting some phrasing up that you're comfortable with. Thank you, Rebecca, for that. Jakob, do you want to talk to your concern?
Yes, thanks very much. And unfortunately, this will be the last thing I can do today in the meeting. So I'll briefly explain what my thoughts are, but then I'll need to drop, which is not ideal. Very sorry. What I actually, for me, it's more something I lacked in all the list of potential interventions, and what I actually lack for many years already. And maybe there's a lot of, I'm sure there's a lot of things already out there, but sometimes I have the feeling, or when I approach politicians or policymakers or public officials on our work and try to convince them to do it, I would need something like a proof of concept, which kind of really starts from their perspective, and which is not a huge scientific paper, but rather a very handy slide deck, where you can kind of show that's our theory of change. That's why we believe that citizen assemblies should play a major role in strengthening our democracies. And that's why we believe they can. And that's actually also the proof we have from evaluations of assemblies that were successful, from very specific cases globally. And that could be something I could very nicely envisage as a task for such a network as we are, and for a working group to really kind of work something out like this, which is in the end maybe a 20 or 30 slide deck. And everyone can obviously translate it to their language, but and use it. And I have really kind of, check. That's what we actually achieve when we do citizen assemblies. And I'm sure everyone has something like this in their own drawers or on their own laptops, but maybe to really build something which then maybe also link it with one of the potential intervention is the partner with storytellers. It could even be something where we really try to, think it from the point of view of a policymaker and really make it very kind of appealing and, also in the way it is presented and attractive. And that's something I wanted to do for many years, and I never really managed to really kind of get my head around it deeply. And I would enjoy doing that. And and that's what I also initially when I had my first comment today said, I would like to go through all those points and see what are things where really it makes sense that the international network brings something to the table, and where are things like, I don't know, kind of engage a diverse range of traditional media. Media is very much still a national thing. So that's, nothing I would expect that the network can bring something. That's rather something we can all do in our countries and hometowns. And then there's other points where I see that's something we can really do as a network. And one thing I miss is the one I just described.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's brilliant, Jakob, particularly given that you've got to go, because it kind of gives us some direction for the next one potentially. I would say perhaps where this is fitting is a combination of this second point here around sharing standards and data that demonstrate our processes have a greater impact than the status quo. But then also you've linked it into, but that should be run through kind of storytellers or, people who can help us really frame that up for particularly a convening audience, but maybe others. And yeah, maybe if we all combined our efforts, it could be a kick-ass slide deck that we can all then go off and use in our context. So thank you. We'll take that forward as a deliverable we might explore in the next bit.
Great. Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Joe, do you have something to add before we move to our next part of the conversation?
Yeah, something very quick. What Jakob just said is obviously very interesting. And as I said in the chat, the implementation of change. I mean, we are talking about theory of change, and a lot of what we say here is also how we are implementing this in the near future. So maybe in this group we can actually frame it in these two different categories. What we're talking about here and what you just said, Scott, is the theory of change. And what Jakob was going through is how we're going to implement this. We needed this document, we needed this thing. So if we divided this in two different categories, maybe it's easier for us to navigate in the next.
Definitely.
Just thinking loud.
No, I think, Joe, what you've actually just done is give me the perfect segue to the next step, which is I think we need to now start fleshing out the actions underneath these. So, and I think we're all kind of ready to move into that next part of the conversation. So I think that's an excellent shout. I'm just going to put a pin in that last conversation. I'm going to put into the chat, I've just put option 1, keep stakeholders in until we find a better definition. Option 2, remove stakeholders. I'm just going to say until we find a better definition. If people could just like one of those options in the chat, That will just help me know maybe how we deal with it in the short term while we keep working on a better way to phrase that. But I can see Stephanie helping us to formally organise groups and informal constituencies of affected people. Oh, nice. Yeah. The ones who maybe already have a strong voice and those who don't so much. Thanks, everyone. I'll start introducing the next bit while people do that. I just want to quickly check, Lisa, you said I would have added some extra steps to familiarise public with deliberative processes. Yeah, I think we will. That's where we're getting to with our next bit. What I'm going to do in a moment, if you don't mind, I'm going to bring you over to a new map in a second. And it's going to be asking you, of those areas that we've got in the map, which do you think are the top 2 that we should focus on going forward? I think we're going to end up with 3 or 4 at the top. But this is me giving us a chance, now that the dust has settled on the theory of change, to have almost a second crack at identifying our focus areas. And I just think something to keep in mind here is, where are we best positioned to have the biggest impact on building the field? So there's a combination, there's 2 bit parts to that. So one is, what will have the biggest impact? Like, what if we put all our effort in that is most likely, from our understanding of the system, to really increase awareness of and application of these processes. But 2, there's another part of that, which is, but what are we best positioned to do? Because we can collaborate and pull in other disciplines and skills, but I imagine we might want to start from a base of what we know, where already got some strengths that we can leverage. Kirsten, any comments on that before I open up that vote on the group map?
Sorry, I don't want to go back to our discussion. I just wanted to say or add, before we starting on working, what could have a great impact, that this aspect of communication, I think, is often underrated. Because if we look on what threatens democracies, it's often very, very successful narratives, people who get their narrative very successfully across. And I think we have, with deliberation, we have really something to offer, that democracies are missing. We have a vision to offer. And I think communicating this in opposition to what's threatening democracies is not just merely doing better in communication in this or that way. I really think it's an underestimated issue in my point of view.
Yeah, thank you. And Kirsten, does that, I mean, Jamie's given you his hand waves, he definitely agrees. And am I interpreting that, if I reshare my screen, as really a vote for the promotional piece as a focus?
I don't know. I just wanted to say what Jakob just suggested could be something we could also come up with for communication. We could inspire each other. For example, we experimented with having announcement in buses and radios and so on. So we could put up something like Jakob suggested for the proof of concept, also for a small communication deck that people who do citizens assemblies can just follow through, and that can be a little reach a little wider than what usually happens. Often it's very uninspired, doing a little Instagram and a little Twitter, and that's it. I'm exaggerating, but in this direction, I might think.
It's excellent. I think so. And I would argue, just so people are orienting what Kirsten's talking about to the options that are in front of you, I think that's 1B is my understanding. So it's about more people experiencing the processes, either as a participant, contributor, or distant observer. So it could be that if we're getting better at engaging widely during our deliberative processes, that's a real intervention point to help expose people to it, and it has multiple benefits. So if you like what Kirsten's saying, you think that's really where we should focus, then vote there. I'll just get quick comments from Sylvia and Lisa, but then I will open up this vote as people are doing this. So I just want to point out that you just hit the plus next to whichever ones you think we should focus on, and you've got a couple of votes each. So if people can just maybe think about that and be doing that while we're talking. But Sylvia?
Oh, just my doubt about my vote, because you say we best positioned to cause impact, but wouldn't be our focus the areas where we are least positioned? I mean, where we have more to do. I don't know. I feel that if we keep doing more what we are already doing, fine.
No, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. And look, that's a valid angle. I will just flag that if for example, let me use a case study. So what Kirsten was just saying about we aren't great at generally, it's a generalization, but generally not great at the wide engagement that marries up with our deep deliberative processes that we do, perhaps. That's an opportunity area. But it's an opportunity area that leverages off of a strength in that we run deliberative processes, right? So that's a way that we could help run those in a way that exposes more people to the process versus running a media campaign that is entirely outside of our skill set or the parts of the system we normally work in. So I think we can go there, but it's just acknowledging that that probably becomes more about who do we pull into the network? Is that something that we're crowdsourcing and paying, like essentially crowdfunding and paying maybe a consultant or someone to help us with that globally? It's just a different pathway to action versus stuff that we can do ourselves, is part of the decision we need to make. We'll go Lisa and then Tom, but I think vote on what you think we should be focusing on most, and then we'll just have to work out how we actually make it happen. Lisa?
I happened to talk with a democracy expert in my country, and he was just explaining to me how less interested he is in deliberative democracy myself. And I asked myself why that man who is like a nation known person is not interested in deliberative democracy. So I was starting like kind of elaborating, and I myself thought that I myself start writing papers, like not only me, but others as well, and translating papers as well. Whoever you think is worth translating in different language, who wrote things about deliberative democracy or interesting piece that it might be worth translating into different language, please give me your opinions, because people on the academia level, less people know about deliberative democracy, or if they know, they think that it only works in countries where democracy is flourishing. So I am totally against of it, and it needs promotion, but on an academia level, on a simple people level, on a working group level, it's just the layers that people should know. Different layers should be approached differently. So that my opinion is, Kirsten, I'm totally with you, and that requires the promotion on a certain level for some different on a different understanding, different sources. So like papers, like translations, like any other tools and steps in my own country. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. And I think as you referenced, that does build on Jakob's point about could we focus our efforts on one or a few key documents that really are then therefore the best value for translating and using broadly. Tom?
Hey, I appreciate it's not always helpful to suggest changes to a process while in a process. But I'm wondering if, in order to answer this question, if the question is, which of these kind of headings do we pick that we as a group will work on? Maybe it's a bit like what Sylvia was saying. Like I think without unpacking these a bit to find out what are the actual options within these, and then what are the interests and the skills of the people here, it's like, well, for example, my organization is building software to build capacity right now. So we could say, well, oh, I'm excited about 4B. But then if what you mean by 4B is, oh, I'm going to run workshops in Brazil to train people about citizens' assemblies and thereby build capacity. And what I mean is, oh, I'm going to make this software all about democratic lotteries over here. And we actually don't know what are the actual activities. And then if we do know what the actual activities, it doesn't have to be just this group of people who've been meeting, right? Our job could be to flesh out, here's the
Oh,
things that
definitely.
we think people could be asking for, and we could go back out to Democracy R&D Network and say, right, we've done the homework, here's the things, and we now need to know who wants to coalesce around these things. But if we now minimize to like 2 headings without knowing what actually sits under those headings, then I'm not sure that we're going to go in an efficient direction, but maybe I'm saying things you already thought of, and I'll just shut up
No,
now.
I think this is a really good point. So, but let me frame it back then as an offer to the group to check if we're comfortable. Because one way we could do this is we split into. I think what we do need is we need to shift. We need to start dividing and conquering slightly in our approach going forward. So I think so far we've been trying to agree on the whole thing together. But if people are comfortable picking one of these 4 columns to focus on next, that could be the exercise. And that's a few times now that people have suggested that of. We split off and we go, all right, we're going to try and map what is already being done or is planned on being done around making the process better known and appreciated. Let's map out what we're aware of. Let's ask others, pull that in, and then we can step back and go, okay, we got more clarity about what the biggest opportunities are here to focus on. So that is a way that we could do it, Tom. So we're not already committing to particular things, but we're just progressing each of these columns. And then from there we can decide. So would people be comfortable with us doing that? Because we can essentially go straight into that now. Yeah, lots of thumbs. Does anyone have an issue with us just looking at each of those columns in separate groups, mapping out what's being done? I don't think so. Cool. Excellent. Thanks, Tom. I think that's fine. So therefore, what we need to do is try and work out who might be able to split off into each of those groups. So what I might do, if you just
Guys,
give me a second in the... Oh, sorry, go. Was someone
I
going to say
really gotta
something?
leave. There's no sense that I get into a separate group now because I'll leave my partner alone. I'm so sorry, and I hope to see the recording afterwards.
Yeah, that's all good. Thank you so much, Anna. And if you are able to get involved in the next step
I
going
will.
forward, I know you got to juggle today. We'd love to have you in one of them. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Sorry to interrupt. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right.
Scott,
Sorry.
where should I vote? I haven't voted.
I think Tom has saved you from that task, Sylvia. Yeah, so I think you're all good. Just give me 1 second to what I'm going to do is I'm just creating rooms that are going to be named after each of these things. If you just give me 1 second. And then you can so maybe just start thinking about, sorry everyone, just need to quickly create them. Start thinking about which, I'll share my screen as I do it, but which of these you might be willing to jump into next. Because I'm going to create a breakout room for each one. And I think the first exercise, as Thomas has suggested, is working out what is already happening under each of these. Sorry, give me 1 second to put this in. Less likely to reject. More likely to embrace. All right, last one. Because the process is legitimate, credible, and effective. All right. I mean, they all have etc. at the end because I can't fit them all in. So the task. Let me just make sure the task is nice and clear before we move on. So you're about to pick one of 4 breakouts. So a thing will come up for you in a second and it will say, which of those 4 do you want to go into? If you, once you've headed into them, if I could see that we've all ended up going into the same one, I might have to redistribute us a little bit. But the first task, and what I'll do is I'll set up a group map for this in a second while you start chatting, is what are we already aware of that yourselves or others are working on in this space? Maybe we focus our efforts on that first. And then my hope is that if you could also share your email addresses, we can then, I can organize a follow-up for each of those 4 groups to kind of meet separately and start taking some greater ownership over progressing that particular outcome in follow-up meetings. Are we okay with that being the task for today? And then we'll come back and we'll share it with each other. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So I'm going to open that up now, and I'll drag you over to you're going to be looking at this, which is going to look a bit scrappy, but I'll fix it while you're in the groups. So this is what you're currently seeing on Group Map, but I'm going to fix it so that each of these is the headings of each of those outcome areas. And I'm going to update this first question. So instead it says, what actions is the network already taking or planning to take on this outcome? Does that make sense? So if people could answer that question and the second one, please share your email address to begin to be invited to a working group meeting to, progress work on this outcome. Those are the 2 questions, and I'll mirror those across, yeah? But just focus on your group. Awesome. All right, I'm opening up the rooms now. You should be able to pick which one you want to focus on. Thanks all. Start having the chat. Let me know if that hasn't come up for anyone.
Not seeing
Is that
it.
you, Debbie? Hasn't come up. Try down the bottom of your screen. It might either say breakouts or more with 3 dots.
Right. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
There we go. Anyone
No.
still looking for the option?
Yeah, me.
Yep.
Do you have the more button down the bottom, Kirsten?
What button?
You know what's actually easier? Which one do you want to focus on? And I'll put you in there.
I would go to room 1.
Okay. All right. I'll pop you in there now. Who else is stuck? Avinash. Which one do you want to focus on of the 4 areas? Oh, you're on mute, Avinash.
Yeah. Wherever there is less number, I can go there.
Well, the one that has less members, which I was just about to, well, maybe we can merge it anyway. I might put you in with the one that's because conveners are more likely to embrace the process. Is that all right?
Okay.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I'll pop you in now. Hello, David. Everyone's about to come back now. I think something to think about is the desktop review as the next step, but I'll talk to the whole group about that now. Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Lisa. So we're just going to take, if you don't mind, 10 minutes now to just kind of report back to each other, let each other know where we go, and then we'll talk about next steps. I think already something that came up in the group that I was in around embracing the process. I think Benjamin was saying we probably need to scrape kind of the documentation and resources that we're already aware of that's out there as part of the mapping exercise. So I think there probably is a bit of a desktop review step next to complement what you've just done then. But we can talk about that. I can talk about that with David and the team. But do you want to kick off our blue column? Because the process is better known and appreciated. What was some of the stuff that you guys were aware is either happening or planned across the network? Anyone want to kick us off in that group, Jamie?
Which one was that? Was that the first one?
The blue, yeah, the first one.
I can start and then everything I miss, please fill in. So we were talking about stuff that we think is already happening across the network where people are trying different things. And we were discussing the barriers, particularly finance, obviously, but also cultural and political situations amongst populations. And then we sort of then started to discuss an idea of building a sort of toolkit that, you know, there's some brilliant ideas in this group, and building a sort of toolkit of different ways by which you can bring this story into people's lives through creative events, experiences. I think one thing that really stuck for me anyway is the word embodied. The idea of, this is Rebecca, the idea of generating participative experiences for people so that the whole notion of deliberative democracy becomes something that's embodied in them, and referencing the you know, that really brilliant organization that has the sort of democracy Olympics. I can't remember what they're called, but they're, you know what I mean. What they called?
Yeah,
We do democracy.
We do democracy. Yeah, they're great. So the idea of building a roster of new stuff that we could try.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example of, you know, what's already being done, democracy fitness or whatever it is. Yeah, was there anything else that group wanted to shout out? Any other examples of where you think this is being done well now? Or there's conversations actively about doing more?
What do you mean by doing more as a group?
Well, in terms of, yeah, I'm just saying if anyone's aware of any work that is in train to better promote these processes. So, for example, I will just quickly flag, because I didn't get a chance to put it in, is there was something that came out of one of the deep dives at the deliberative process that Meta was involved in, and a few others. That was that influencers one. So the idea that we actually partner with, find a way to fund a consultant who is an expert in kind of briefing up engaging influencers to try and give them some packages that are a little more, there's kind of clear incentives for them to get involved in this, either because they've got access to, maybe exclusive access to deliberative processes to, you know, share them directly, or trying to give them packages that enables them to talk about it on their podcasts or through their channels. And yeah, just trying to get a bit better at the approach to influencers. So we're giving them stuff that's usable that they could share. And we're talking about people who are probably more likely to be civically or politically engaged as influencers in their networks. But that is something that's in train, and we're having a meeting with the network to see if that becomes something. So that's an example. Rebecca, you aware of anything else?
Yeah, well, we did talk a little bit about that. I think Jamie raised some a note of caution around influencers as a messenger, and talked about the need to provide advocacy training for people who have experienced, who former assembly members, for example, And I didn't share this in the group, but I'll share it here. But Involve has something called the School for Everyday Democracy. That's what we do. It's like alumni from our processes, and we take them away for residential weekends and train them up as kind of as activists and advocates for democracy. And some of them have developed their own kind of campaign work that is really coming from like their lived experience and their role. And there's a woman called Louise Caldwell, who was a member of the Citizens Assembly in Ireland, and she is one of the most vocal advocates in Ireland for a Citizens Assembly, actually, because they didn't have a civil society partner. It was held by the Houses of the Oireachtas and the Civil Service. So Louise has kind of really stepped out into that public realm and talks about it from a much less official and formal point of view, and I think has done a really great job of humanizing what that process is. So yeah, just adding that.
Amazing, awesome. I think,
Script,
can you see the value though of for us to be aware that Involve has done that is really, I think, valuable as terms of going, well, can we replicate that elsewhere? How do we build on that rather than starting from scratch? So that's awesome. Thank you. I will just, in the interest of time, check in with the next group. Who was talking about because conveners and stakeholders are more likely to embrace the process than Screedy and team. What did we talk about there that we want to flag?
Yeah, we spoke about things that some of us are doing already. For example, in New York, to try and reach out to the new mayor-elect's office and see if he'll actually embrace citizens' assemblies as a process when he gets into office. And we're probably all looking forward to that happening. And in India, we are in a field building process ourselves now. We also have other things that are happening around the world. New Democracies book, the new edition of the UNDEF book, and people are featured in it. For example, one of the local government representatives is featured in the UNDEF book from Pune. So I think celebrating conveners and stakeholders who have supported, that would be maybe influential for other conveners, potential conveners. We also have, for example, Delibra's strategy, which worked very well in Brazil. So that's a great example for us to both learn from and maybe use, the spokespersons from the local governments that ran successful citizen assemblies again to, as testimonies. And yeah, basically combine all of these strategies, maybe also look outside of the DRND network. For example, the small grants program that People Powered runs with its Democracy Accelerator program, which seems to be a pretty good strategy too. Yeah, that's what we have so far.
And that is a good reminder for us to map beyond the network to where we can, in case there's some good approaches. And I will flag that, there's a little bit of chat too about like to Jakob's earlier point, like there would be organizations that are using pitch decks to persuade conveners to run processes. So maybe there's even just an element of flushing those out and just seeing what people are using as a starting point might help too. Thanks, Screedy and team. Last group, looking at, because the process is legitimate, credible and effective, you did a really good brain dump. Any highlights you want to share from that group? What's being done there? Leonie?
Hi, everyone. It's my first time in the group, so maybe I benefit from the outsider's perspective. I think first there was talk about mapping and evaluation and maybe having a common framework for evaluation of processes. And then we talked briefly about Jakob's idea, basically, because I support the idea that it would be very helpful to have a theory of change actually, not just about how to build the field and implement something from which we think we already know what the benefits are, but actually thinking more deeply about what the benefits might be and how these processes could change our political system. Because my hypothesis would be that we actually disagree a lot about that as well, but we talk very little about it. And I would find it very interesting to have that exchange about what role we actually think deliberative processes could play in a democratic system in the long run, apart from, just convening more and more citizens' assemblies, maybe. And so maybe that would be a fruitful exercise to kind of build on the work that this group has done now, or like a next exercise or step.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. And I think that very much is something that sits. It's clear how complementary it is to this, right? So whether it ends up being something this group directly runs or not, I think it sounds like unless you have some measurable impacts of what these processes do that you can then leverage to build the field, then it can be a misguided exercise. We probably need to clarify, David, whether that work is going to be done or whether this group needs to drive that going forward.
I think Leonie was bringing up an important point, which is not theory of change is generally how to cause the change. There's also two prior questions, what to change and what to change to. And I think Leonie was pointing out that there's far from agreement in the network or even clarity in a lot of people's minds about what to change to. I just want to mention that we have a deliberative constitutions and charters interest group has been meeting about every month of people who are thinking about how to incorporate elements for deliberative democracy into constitutions and charters and the processes of designing and amending them. A lot of the thinking about that is happening in that group.
Thank you, Tom. You're going to add something, and then Joe quickly, and then I'll talk about next steps.
Yeah, so just reflecting on the group I've been in group 4 and thinking about the activities we've been taking part in ourselves. The stuff we've been working on that's felt possible has been through the UK network of deliberative practitioners, where it feels like we have common experiences and common objectives. And this session is helping me to think about what is really possible in a more global context. Is it possible to work on these activities when our experiences are very different and when the impacts are likely to be diffuse and when our time zones are different and so on? And I don't mean to be a killjoy, but that's a strong outcome that I am left with is like, oh yeah, we're at the foothills of attempting some of this stuff in a UK context, and then we've thrown a group of people together who are like, oh, I'm excited about this idea. I'm coming from the UK, where we're also talking about how do we build this stuff up in the UK and address a lot of these same issues. And we've just done our own theory of change in my organization. It's addressing a lot of these same issues. It feels like we're jumping to the global before we're only just getting to grips with our own theory of change as an organization, and we're just putting into practice some of these activities as a UK network where it's easier to relate to what each other are talking about. So challenges for this activity, I reckon.
Yeah, and I think also a refinement, Tom, it might help us realize where this group can best support is it's not necessarily driving those actions so much as keeping those different regional bodies connected, sharing resources, building off each other rather than starting everything from scratch. It's that adaptation we talked about earlier rather than, So I think it'll probably help refine the nature of this role as we go forward. But probably first step is to map those. Quick comments from Jamie and Sylvia. Actually, sorry, Joe, did you have something you wanted to add first?
I can talk after them.
No, you were ready, Joe. Go. What were you going to say?
Yeah. So it's very quick. It's just observation. It's about the contradictions of our citizens' assemblies. For example, here in Germany, the government took a decision that we have to kind of militarize the country. So spend the money on military equipment, so on, so forth. and most people are not in line with this decision. But we don't have money to do this. So to do this, we have to go through cut the social spending, which is a huge cut here in Germany. And then we say, okay, but this is democracy. They decide what is better for the country, right? But if we organize the citizens' assemblies now and say, look, what is better for the country? People decide. And most likely they will decide, no, we're not doing this. We're doing something different. And the government, if they see it, they will say, I will never put this in my constitution because at many points, I will not be able to do what I want because the Citizens' Assembly will decide in their favor. I mean, at the same time, we know that the government and the people are in the same line for some subjects and in opposite sides in the other subjects. So it's very difficult to say this is Citizens' Assemblies is a solution to democracy when we are in opposing sides in different subjects. So I don't know how to frame it, but it's just an observation.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And I think it builds off Leonie's point about, what are we ultimately trying to aim there? And to Tom's point about the regionality kind of considerations of some of this too. Quick comments, Jamie, then Sylvia, and then we'll wrap.
Yeah, I sort of echoes what you were saying as well, Joe, just now, but I was responding to Tom originally. I think it's a really important perspective to realize that this is very much at the starting phases of learning, right? And we had this amazing meeting 2 days ago with 2 very young practitioners from La Gambia. And they've been trained really well. Their facilitation was brilliant, right? And they've just done an assembly. The simple point I want to make is I view it as if you go into working with people in the majority world, with people around the world, there's so many more great lessons to be learned from their own different cultural approach, right? And we went away. I'm not a process expert, right? But I went away having an even better perspective of what's possible with these by listening to the different cultural approach to these. The main point is this: they're going, well, we have assemblies. It's part of, they're called this. I can't remember the African name, but this is what we do anyway. So for them, it's not like a new way of dealing with things. It's bringing in the Citizens' Assembly model that we're talking about and working it with what's been there for thousands of years. So I'm just saying it's an enriching process. As long as you don't go in saying, no, I'm from England and this is the way you do it. In fact, if you do it completely oppositely, we've got so much to learn from cultures that have had this for thousands of years in the first place.
I just wanted to say we can learn so much from England.
I think from all directions here, and that I suppose speaks to the value of this exercise, even if it is different regions connecting in and out and then going off and doing their work based off that. Sylvia, last comment.
Oh, just to include the part of capacity building that we discuss, that has a lot of Sortition Foundation does a lot of work on this capacity building. And we were discussing about how capacity building is very, very necessary, but it's not enough because, for example, in Brazil, we don't have many organizations who want to do it. And then we were discussing that it will be like a market. If you have more demand and more governments and more decision makers wanting to do it, then organizations and facilitators will start willing to be capacitated to do it. So it's a kind of virtual circle that and I just wanted to tell Tom about something that I remember that's nice. One of our first materials that we produced with Delibera was with Brett and with Sortition Foundation. We did a little pamphlet like that, 10 reasons to do a mini public. We have to take a look at that. It was 8 years ago.
Yeah, and look, I love that as an example too, Sylvia, because it doesn't need to be all these earth-shattering interventions sometimes. It can just be a simple crowdsourced thing that we've worked on and refined together with good evidence that we then take forth. So thank you. That's awesome. Thanks, everyone. Sorry we're over time. Would love to just keep chatting about this stuff, but I think going forward, I will need to reconnect in with David and the team, the network team, to decide exactly how to move forward. I think what's become clear from this conversation today is to finish this mapping exercise, and I think probably the most efficient way to do that is a bit of a desktop review, that we then meet again in either together or in those kind of 3 groups that you just started then, to say, all right, here's a visualization of what's happening. What does that mean? You know, does it mean that there's big gaps that we need to fill and lead an action? Is it that we just need to connect these different people? Is it that there's one piece that if we could just develop that, everyone can then go off and use it? I think the exact intervention from this group will become clearer once we have that map laid out. So I think perhaps that's the next step. So watch this space, particularly early next year, to be reconvened. We may ask you to maybe send some additional things over email potentially in the meantime while we're doing that mapping, but we will come back together again, I think, next with more visibility under these areas as the next step. Sylvia?
Sorry, but I have to bring an issue. In Brazil, December and January are the summer vacation time. So I'd really not like, I'd like not to work so hard in January in anything. I will have to work in many things, but I'd really not to. So I'd like to ask for this group not to put deadlines for January, that we can meet again in the end of January and then have some deliverables later, because it's really tough for us to do things, especially those things that are not our own projects going on. This network work. So that's my request.
Understood. Thanks, Sylvia. I think we're probably on track for a late Jan, early Feb meeting anyway by the time we've done that review. I really probably should wrap. I'll stay on, Lisa, if you've got something you've got to tell me, but I need to release everyone. So thank you so much for all your work on this, and we will continue the conversation going into the new year. Thank you so much.
Thanks for
Thank you for
facilitating.
your work